Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Unbashful. This is episode 44, pardon me. And I want to thank you very much for stopping by here today. We are going to kick today's episode off with the James Gunn and Peter Safran DC news. So last episode, I talked a lot about DC. I talked about their direction. I talked about their identity, and I basically expressed a lot of my issues that I had with them as of recently. But I also talked about how the future could be bright, maybe, possibly. Shortly after that episode, in fact, while I was editing it, the news about James Gunn and Peter Safran dropped, and it kind of made me question if I should have even dropped the episode, if I should have maybe took that take out and redid it and added that news. But I decided to put it up anyways because I felt that there was enough content in there that was still relevant enough for a discussion. So I kept it in there, but I've been now looking forward to collecting my thoughts and looking it over, and now we're going to talk about it. So before we get into that, for those of you who aren't familiar with what I'm talking about right now, let's just read a quote from Variety that kind of summarizes this news. So it says here, James Gunn and Peter Safran have been tapped as co-chairman and co-CEOs of DC Studios, a newly created production entity that will oversee DC properties for Warner Brothers Discovery. That, of course, comes from Variety. So basically, more or less, DC has found their Kevin Feige, if you will. There's been a lot of names thrown around in this role, in this position. Mostly names that I hadn't ever heard of, and mostly names that, after I did my research, a lot of these people were just mostly producers. They didn't really know a lot about the source material. They weren't like Kevin Feige in terms of like, they weren't fans themselves and nerds themselves. And you don't have to be a nerd to run a studio, but I think it is important to kind of have some sort of established idea of these universes, of these characters. And I think as fans, it gets us more excited knowing that we have somebody leading the charge that understands fandom, that understands culture. And make no mistake, that's what we have here with James Gunn. And I like how they hired two people for this position, two people to see the studio. And the role here, there's another quote here that addresses the role. And this, once again, comes from Variety. It says, Gunn and Safran will now oversee film, TV, and animation at DC Studios. Before I continue, that's actually something else I want to note as well. DC has never been its own studio like Marvel has. Marvel has always been their own studio. Yes, they're owned by Disney, but they make all their creative decisions and they greenlight whatever project they want to do. Obviously, Disney is the distributor. I think that's how it works. Correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, they kind of have their own thing going while they're being owned by Bob Chapek and everybody upstairs at Disney. DC has never been like that. They've just been almost like a banner, one of the banners underneath Warner Brothers. But now, while they're going to be still obviously owned by Warner Brothers, they have their own studio, so they can make those internal decisions on their own. And it's going to feel more kind of collective, and we're going to look at them more as a sole proprietor, as a sole identity. But anyways, the article continues. Where did I leave off here? So they will assume their new roles on November 1st, today. They will report to Warner Brothers Discovery President and CEO David Zaslav and will work closely with Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdi, co-chairpersons and CEOs of Warner Brothers Film Group, Both are also expected to continue on other projects outside of DC. Now, I don't want people to get their hopes up. You could read that and think like, well, James Gunn can still do Marvel stuff. I think this deal, and I think David Zaslav locking Gunn up. Apparently, the deal is reported to be 4 years long, and they're calling it an exclusive deal. So while it does say here in this article that both are expected to continue to work on other projects outside of DC, I don't think when it comes to James Gunn, I'm not really sure about Peter Safran, but when it comes to James Gunn, I don't think that we're going to be seeing him doing any Marvel projects anytime soon. Maybe he'll get a producer credit for something. Like we see that a lot. It's very easy to get a producer credit. I mean, there's been stories of directors calling another director for advice, and then boom, that's a producer credit. So maybe something as little as that, but even then, I think that's definitely up for question. So if you're holding out hopes that you're going to see another James Gunn directed project in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I would not hold your breath whatsoever. Like I said, maybe he could produce something, but even then, I would just hold. I would just pause that and just treat that as if we've had the trilogy. Well, we're going to have the trilogy with James Gunn. We're going to have that third film coming out. But after that, I think that chapter is closed. I think him getting fired, while they brought him back, but I think him getting fired definitely kind of maybe affected that relationship. Not between Kevin Feige and James Gunn, because I don't think Kevin Feige was the one that made that decision. Maybe he delivered that decision to James Gunn, but I don't think it was his idea to let him go over those tweets that happened a while ago. Which I will admit, those tweets were fucked up. I'm not going to sit here and say, like, you know, they were pretty weird. I'll just be totally honest with you. He made some, I can't even remember the exact jokes that he made. It was something pretty fucked up. But I digress. They brought him back. We're getting the third Guardians film. I'm happy that we didn't get a different director. I'm happy that we still have the same tone and vision. As for my opinion on James Gunn, and I know a lot of you are probably, wondering why I haven't addressed Peter Safran. I'm gonna get to him in a second, but I want to talk about James Gunn a little bit more. With James Gunn, I'm a pretty big fan of his films. I really, really love, in fact, I think Guardians of the Galaxy, in my opinion, is a top 5 MCU project. I think it's one of the best projects in the MCU, period. That side of Marvel, the cosmic, more fantasy side of that cinematic universe, that's what I'm a big fan of, right? I like the street level stuff. I'm looking forward to Daredevil, but for me, the larger than life, celestial, like I said, the cosmic side, that's my favorite side of the MCU. So I love that he sort of spearheaded that side of the MCU, and he introduced us to that area with the Guardians. And I like Guardians too. I think it's fun, but I don't like it as much as the first film. It definitely plants some seeds. It kind of teases us that Adam Warlock is coming to the MCU, which we do know is going to be the main, I'm pretty sure he's going to be the main antagonist of the third film coming up. So, not a bad film, not as good as the first one. And Suicide Squad. Now, when it comes to that franchise, I'm not one of these people that hates David Ayer's version of the film. Now, I understand that he didn't get to show everything that he wanted to do. Apparently, the film was chopped to bits due to, studio interference and whatnot. But still, I enjoyed that first Suicide Squad film that we got directed by him. And I'm actually one of these people that I kind of like Jared Leto's Joker, believe it or not. Is he the best Joker? No. But that iteration and what they were going for, I think it worked for the cinematic universe. And I did not mind Jared Leto's Joker. I think it was different. Just like Batman, just like any character that's had reboots and different actors playing them, you have to find a way to separate it from the previous iteration. So a lot of people took issue with, you're giving him tattoos and this, that, and the other, and whatever. I can understand that concern, and I can understand that criticism. But in reality, the creators, the writers, David Ayer, they needed to do something that was going to separate itself from Heath, because that those comparisons are inevitable with Jared Leto's Joker, and it's going to be like that forever. When Barry Keoghan, when we see more of him, because we will see more of him, obviously, as this new version of the Joker. We all know that the comparisons to Heath Ledger, to Jack Nicholson, those are inherently going to come. Just like every time we get a new Batman, going to be compared to Christian Bale, going to be compared to Michael Keaton. It's a part of the game, right? So you have to find a way to make it different. And we're already seeing them try to do that with Barry Keoghan. Not to get sidetracked, I'll get back to DC here for a sec, but with Barry Keoghan, we're seeing his character has almost like a deformity in his face that makes it so he can't not smile. And we're seeing he's kind of missing He's like got patchy hair, patchy green hair. So they're already visually, stylistically doing things to this version of the character that Matt Reeves has built to separate it from Heath Ledger. And I'm glad that we're going with a shorter haired Joker. I think we've had Heath Ledger, we've had the long-haired Heath Ledger Joker, we've had Joaquin's long-haired Joker, which we will have again, but I'm glad that we're kind of going a little bit shorter hair. But anyways, circling back to what the main topic here of today's podcast was, I'm a fan of James Gunn being I think he's being tapped as the creative leader of DC Studios, and then Peter Safran is going to be focusing on the producing side of it and the business side of it, which you have to think about that for a second. They have two guys to fill these roles, which makes sense, but that really is showing people how much of a genius and how one of a kind Kevin Feige is, because he basically does both of those. He's an extremely successful producer, decades of experience going back to Sam Raimi and Spider-Man and the early Fox X-Men films, to somebody that also understands what the fans want to see from a creative perspective. So you really kind of have to give your hat off to Kevin Feige. Not saying he hasn't already had enough praise. The guy, he's not underrated in terms of his impact in what he does. We understand that, but I think you further have to acknowledge like the fact that DC got two people to fill that void when Marvel has had one guy pretty much do that. Obviously, he has help. He has Louis D'Esposito and I can't remember the other he's got like Nate Moore, and he's got all these other producers that obviously help him, but he's pretty much the main guy that we look at as fans. So yeah, James Gunn, I'm a big fan of that. You know, he's expressed his excitement and his years of fandom he's personally had for DC Comics, and we all know that James Gunn loves to explore characters that general audiences aren't very familiar with. Now I'm excited to see how he takes that approach with the main staple characters that most audiences are familiar with, like Superman, like Batman, The Flash, because he's expressed in the past that he wants to stray away from telling stories of those main characters just because of, you know, the inherent criticism and backlash that comes with fans, because there's so much pressure to do these characters justice, and you're never going to please everybody. But now he can't really feel that way because now he's responsible for all these characters. So I'm sure we're going to get more projects of more obscure characters that a lot of people aren't familiar with in the DC universe. But now he's going to have to focus on our main characters. So I'm excited to see what kind of decisions and creative ideas he has for them. So yeah, overall, big fan of James Gunn taking this job. And I think it's a thumbs up for sure. So let's address Peter Safran. So who is Peter Safran? He's a producer that's worked with James Gunn for many years, so they already have an established relationship. So they're not going to have to get to know each other and build chemistry. It's almost like sports. You're bringing a new head coach, or you're bringing new free agents together. It's not going to take that time to build that together. They already know each other. They've already worked with each other. And one step further, Peter Safran has already worked with Warner Brothers for many years beyond the stuff that he's done with James Gunn. So let's see here. This comes from Variety. Safran has produced several DC films, including Aquaman and its upcoming film Shazam, and its upcoming sequel, as well as, of course, The Suicide Squad with James Gunn, and Peacemaker as well with James Gunn. His production company, the Safran Company, recently renewed its production deal with Warner Brothers. So overall, to round out this topic, I think this is great for DC. I think it's definitely the right move, especially since I was hearing some of the other names getting tossed around, successful producers, but I was getting worried that, like, do these guys really know? Are they really tapped into the pop culture zeitgeist? Do they really understand what we as fans want to see? Because I feel like the previous ownership didn't. I feel like they were too prideful. They were taking way too many liberties. They had Superman sidelined. I'm not the biggest fan of Superman, but I like Henry Cavill as Superman, right? So if we're going to have a Superman, I think it's the right decision to bring him back. Who knows? Maybe we'll get something with Ben Affleck. Maybe apparently he's re-signed a multi-picture deal to return in other characters' movies, not his own movie. But I think the future is looking bright. And it's nice to know that DC is now its own self-contained studio while still being under Warner Brothers. And I think this 10-year plan that David Zaslav has talked about, I think we're starting to slowly see it come to fruition. Let me know what you guys think about this. Are you a fan of James Gunn? Are you a fan of Peter Safran? And also, apparently, James Gunn will still direct some certain projects here and there. In fact, before this news came out, there was also reports and articles that James Gunn pitched a secret project in the DC universe. That's another thing as well. It's not called the DCEU anymore. It's now called the DCU. Once again, another way for them to separate themselves from the previous regime, from the previous Zack Snyder, universe, and really telling everybody that still a lot of the same characters introduced back then, but we're having a fresh start. Let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. Okay, so let's address the title of this video. I'm going to now give my top 5 most anticipated films heading into this month. I think October was kind of a dry month. There was definitely some things to be excited for. Black Adam. If you're a big Halloween fan, there was Halloween Ends, and there was a couple of other films that I might be forgetting. Definitely a lot better than September. September was dead. You had a couple things. There's always a couple things that come out, but these last couple of months have been pretty wanting in terms of big movies and fun movies to go see at the theater. But there's a lot to look forward to this month. Some streaming, some theatrically, and a couple of these films that I'm going to mention here on this list. In fact, actually, I think a lot of them are streaming. Let me look at this one more time before. A couple of these are going to go to streaming, but they're going to get theatrical releases. So anyways, let's just get to it. These are my top 5 films that I'm looking forward to in the month of November 2022. Number 5, we have Weird: The Al Yankovic Story. I love biopics. I love Rocketman. I love Bohemian Rhapsody. I loved Elvis. Elvis is one of my favorite movies that came out this year. And more specifically, I love biopics about artists, about musicians. Yeah, they may have a formulaic, style of storytelling. You start off a lot of these films start off with the rise, like we see our characters at the rise, and then they sort of tell the story laterally, and we see their downfall, and it's almost like non-linear storytelling, which isn't anything new. But the thing that excites me about this film is that it seems to be embracing a little bit more comedy, and it looks funny while still having those dramatic elements to it. I'm not the biggest Weird Al fan. My dad, when I was younger, listened to a lot of his music, but me specifically, I'm not the biggest Weird Al fan myself. But once again, a biopic, that gets me excited, so that's my number 5. Number 4, we have The Son. And this is directed by Florian Zeller, who directed The Father, which won Best Picture a couple of years ago. Actually, I think not last year, but the year before. I think it was at the 2020 Oscars that it won Best Picture. No, that was Chloe Zhao's Nomadland. I can't remember. He directed The Father, and I know that it won some kind of Academy Award. And this stars Hugh Jackman, Laura Dern, and Anthony Hopkins, and a couple other people, but I can't remember their names. And right then and there, you have 3 Academy recognized actors and actresses. I'm pretty sure Laura Dern has Academy Award. Either she's won or she has Academy recognition. But this is a very talented cast, Academy Award winning director. And basically, to me, what the plot of this film is showing is that it's sort of a child. It's a teenager growing up, and it seems like he's lost. It seems like he might be developing some mental health issues, and he's almost in search of a guardian, of a sort of masculine presence in his life. And it seems like he's lived with his mom most of his life, and I feel like maybe he feels like he's lost time, and he hasn't had enough time with his father, and maybe him living with his father could help him in some kind of way. I'm not entirely sure. I always do a bad job of explaining the the plots to film, so if you really want to go see, I suggest you check out the trailer. But it looks very good. I went to TIFF this September, and this was one of the movies that I did try to see. Along with Glass Onion and a couple of others. But I didn't get to see it. I ended up seeing The Fabelmans, which was, I cannot wait till audiences get to see The Fabelmans. That movie was incredible, especially if you're somebody that's trying to become a filmmaker, not even just a filmmaker, if you want to get into, the film industry, if you want to be an actor like me, or if you want to be anything, I think it still will resonate with you, because it resonated with me. I don't want to necessarily be a filmmaker. I want to be an actor. But the film made me cry because I shared a lot of the sentiments that essentially the film was almost like an autobiography. It's very autobiographical of Steven Spielberg without the character literally being Steven Spielberg. It's different characters, but it's the same kind of story, but not to get sidetracked. So yeah, number 4, The Son. Very much looking forward to that. Number 3, we have another film that was at TIFF called Causeway, which is directed by, hopefully I don't mispronounce this too bad, Lila Neubauer. Not too familiar with her. Apparently she has a background in the theater, and this is her directorial debut. And this is starring Jennifer Lawrence and Brian Tyree Henry. And the sort of general plot is that Jennifer Lawrence was a soldier. She's returning back to her home in New Orleans. And I guess her time in the army, she suffered some kind of brain injury. It also looks like it's dealing with a lot of mental health matters, maybe some post-traumatic stress disorder. It might be playing into that. It seems like she's having a very difficult time readjusting to society, given her obvious circumstance when she was on tour. And throughout this film and throughout her time, her character finds a friend named Brian Tyree Henry's character, and it seems like maybe they share some similar experiences. Maybe he himself was a soldier, and maybe there's that sort of relatability. But once again, it looks like a very grounded story. I love stories like this. I love these independent projects, and it's nice to see that. It's nice to see Jennifer Lawrence. I think she's a fantastic actress, and once again, another Academy Award-winning actress. And Brian Tyree Henry, we're starting to see him pop up in more and more projects. I loved him in Bullet Train. I loved him in Eternals. I've heard a lot about that show he's in with Lakeith Stanfield and Donald Glover called Atlanta, which is to my knowledge, it's about the kind of music industry and stuff like that. I do want to check that out at some point. So he's a fantastic actor. So that's my number 3. Number 2, we have Glass Onion, A Knives Out Story. So funny thing about this film, this is literally these 4 films that I just talked about, all of them were at TIFF, including Weird Al. And so was Glass Onion. Glass Onion, and The Fabelmans were basically like the 2 headliners. Those were the most popular films that everybody was trying to see. I was fortunate enough, like I said, to see The Fabelmans, but I didn't get to see Glass Onion. However, I almost had the opportunity to see it for free right after. So I'm from Toronto. Obviously, TIFF is in Toronto. Anyways, right after I saw The Fabelmans, and I left the theater, and I saw it at the Prince of Wales Theater, and right after I left the theater, across the street, there was this another big auditorium. I can't remember the name of it, but for those of you who live in that area, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's like this big, it's very beautiful architecture. It's like this big kind of glass dome-ish building. It's a theater. They were playing a screening of Glass Onion there, and you could get in for free if you had a Presto card. Which is in Canada and in Toronto. That's basically like it's like a pass you get on. You pay for it allows you to get on the train, allows you to take the bus, and all 4 are free. I say that in air quotes as long as you have a Presto card. You can still take the train, you can still take the bus, but instead of paying that initial out of pocket. Did my camera just shut off? Let me just check that real quick. No, we're still rolling. Excuse me. We're still rolling. Pardon me. We're going to continue. Sometimes the camera makes a little bit of a sound, and when it does that, it means it's shut off because the camera can only record so long on each take, but we're good. So yeah, they had a free screening of Glass Onion if you had a Presto card and the line was just down the fucking street. It was just from the auditorium all the way past the Prince of Wales Theater. So I would have waited in that line because I would have saw The Fabelmans and I would have saw Glass Onion all in one day. Because Glass Onion is getting a theatrical release, but it's very, very limited. It's like a 1 week release here in Canada. And I think really across the world, which makes sense. Obviously, Netflix threw $400 million for the rights. They want that. They want people to come to their platform to watch it. So, yeah, Glass Onion, for those of you who have no fucking idea what I'm talking about right now, this is, I guess you could call it a sequel. I'm just going to call it a spinoff to Knives Out. And in Knives Out, we were introduced to Detective Benoit Blanc, I think is his name, which is Daniel Craig's character. And fans loved him so much, and they loved that character so much that we were like, okay, like, what are some other stories we could see specifically with him? What are some other cases that he's solved? And this is another, they're calling this literally Glass Onion, a Knives Out story. So it's not a direct sequel, at least to my knowledge. It's not a direct sequel to Knives Out. Like, we're not going to see Chris Evans come back. We're not going to see Lakeith Stanfield's character come back. We're not going to see Anna de Armas. We're not going to see, all those other characters from that, the woman from Halloween. We're not going to see them come back. At least I don't think so. So it's a whole new cast. We have Daniel Craig. I think he's the only one returning, of course, obviously. We have Daniel Craig. We have Edward Norton. I love Edward Norton. Dave Bautista. By the way, Dave Bautista, I think, is honestly, I don't want to say he's an underrated actor. I think he's become a much better actor, and I think people should start giving him a little bit more credit because he obviously started off in the WWE scene and then transitioned to the big screen. And a lot of times those kind of actors aren't taken very serious. But I think he's made a pretty good career, and he's worked with very, very auteur and very talented directors. He's worked with Denis Villeneuve. He had that brief role in Blade Runner 2049, and he's worked with Zack Snyder on Army of the Dead, and of course he's done the Marvel stuff and with James Gunn. But now we're seeing him with Rian Johnson, another very, very talented auteur director. So yeah, we have Dave Bautista, then we have Kate Hudson, then we have Ethan Hawke, love Ethan Hawke, Catherine Hahn, love Catherine Hahn, and then we have Janelle Monáe, and then there's some others, but that's like the main cast. That's my number 2. I'm incredibly excited. I don't even really know what the story is to this film. It's obviously some kind of mystery. It looks like it takes place on this yacht, on this island. Who knows? But it's going to be good. Number 1, I cheated. Number 1 is a tie between 2 films. One of them, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. The next film is called Bones and All, directed by Luca Guadagnino. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. And this director, once again, another auteur. I'm pretty sure he wrote and directed Call Me By Your Name. He directed the Suspiria remake in a couple years ago with the actress who's going to be in Madam Web. I can't remember her name, but she's also from the 50 Shades films. She's a good actress. He is an incredibly talented director, and he's one of those directors that I'm waiting to see. I want to see him make more movies, right? Because he's got his own style. He's found his own kind of lane, so to speak. And once again, Timothée Chalamet is coming back to work with him. We have Taylor Russell. And as for this looks like a very dark film. It seems to have it's based off a book. It seems to be about this dark, twisted romance between these 2 people that are cannibalistic. And it's like, it's wild. In fact, I feel like I'm not going to be doing it justice. Let me try and find a plot synopsis here. Bones and All synopsis. Love blossoms between a young woman on the margins of society and a disenfranchised drifter as they embark on a 3,000-mile odyssey through the backroads of America. However, despite their best efforts, all roads lead back to their terrifying past and a final stand that will determine whether their love can survive their differences. Okay, so they didn't really address the cannibalism in that, but I think that's probably what it's referring to when it says, despite their best efforts, all roads lead back to a terrifying past. So, yeah, that was a much better description than I could have given you. So yeah, I'm really, really excited for this film, and the trailer hooked me. The music, the song that they played in it, and I have it on my phone. As soon as I heard it, So much of my music that I listen to, I hear from movies. What was the song here? Yeah, You Want It Darker. Here, I'll play a little. Yeah. Yeah. I won't play that for too long. It'll destroy the mic. But yeah, the trailer was great. I've seen another clip of Taylor Russell's character literally chewing a girl's finger off. It was gruesome, but I think the trailer literally quoted, it was like it's like a horrifying romance, or I'm paraphrasing, something like that, but that looks incredible. I cannot wait. And I think that's got some Academy recognition, Oscar bait, if you will, written all over that. And then, of course, as I said, tied with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, there's not much I need to say about this film that I haven't already said. So there's no point in me going on and on about it. We're all excited for it. We're all curious to see how they're going to address the loss of T'Challa and how, you know, Wakanda is vulnerable and how, you know, they're in a very kind of shell-shocked space, because you got to remember, now they've lost T'Challa, but then not too long before that, they lost T'Challa's father. So a lot of loss, a lot of grief, a lot of mourning while they have to deal with Talocan, which is essentially Marvel's take on Atlantis, and they have to deal with Namor and everything else going on around them. So I'm super excited for that. I'm seeing that November 10th. I cannot wait. So yeah, that is my top 5 most anticipated films going into this month. There's a couple others that I was considering putting in here. Like there's a film called My Policeman that was also at TIFF, and it's basically about this love triangle, at the center of it being Harry Styles, and he's in love with this woman, and then he starts to develop. I think he's in a relationship, and I think he's married with this woman, but I think he starts to have an affair with this other gentleman. So, you know, interesting. I'll probably check it out. It looks pretty intriguing, but I don't think it has me as hooked as these other films did. And I'm sure there's some others that I could be forgetting as well. But let me know what your top 5 of this month is going to be. And let me know if you're excited. Let me know if you feel the same about these films as I do. Let me know down in the comments below. So for the next topic, I want to talk about a Fallout Amazon TV series that's coming. Now, this isn't necessarily news. It's been in development for quite a while, but I just found out about it pretty recently. And in terms of my history with the Fallout franchise, now I don't play video games anymore. I've foregone that last year. I had a day where I just had a kind of like an audit, and I asked myself, like, what are some habits or what are some things that I'm doing that are potentially holding me back from being more productive or getting more things done, or that are holding me back from my potential. And I had to have a harsh reality check with myself and tell myself that video games is probably one of those, if not the biggest one. Not that I was addicted to video games, I wasn't. But those few hours that I would play whatever Call of Duty, I could have been, you know, dedicating that to working on the craft of acting, learning it, because being an actor or trying to be an actor is one of the most competitive industries in this world. There's a reason why like 0.00001% of people get into this business. So I have to find ways to separate myself from the competition in any way that I can. And if I can give myself more time to work on that, and not just acting, I'm talking this podcasting, I'm talking other projects, you know, modeling, whatever. I have to make sacrifices, which is essentially what I did. But with that being said, one of my favorite video games to play was Fallout. And for those of you who don't know what Fallout is, it's like this post-apocalyptic RPG game. It's a big open world experience, and each game takes place in a respective city in the United States. Like I think Fallout 3 took place in Washington, Fallout 4 took place in Boston, Fallout New Vegas, of course, takes place in Vegas, and so on and so forth. I think 76, I never played that one. I think that one takes place in Virginia. So yeah, it's an incredibly addicting game because there's always something new you can do even after you beat the main story. There's side quests. There's lots of games that adopt that format, but Fallout for me is one of my favorite games of all time. Call of Duty was one as well, but there's a new one that comes out every year. There's only a new Fallout there's only like one Fallout that comes out like each decade, really. And we're probably not going to see another one come out until maybe at the end of this decade, if not early 2030s, which would just crazy. And I will say, if there's ever going to be a time that I'm going to come back to video games briefly, it's not going to be for a new COD, it's not going to be for NBA 2K. It'll be when the new Fallout comes out, and I probably won't even play. I'll literally just buy it just to check it out, just to see what it is, or I'll probably just watch somebody play it. Who knows? But yeah, I don't play video games anymore. But Fallout, for me, was one of those games when I did play a lot that I cherished, and it holds a special place in my heart. I grew up. My neighbor, when I was like 8 years old, introduced me to it. I used to beg my mom to go to his house, and I think at that time he had New Vegas, and yeah, I was like 8 or 9 years old, and my neighbor showed me it, and he would show me. We would always play. If you've played Fallout New Vegas and you go to that town and you have to shoot the geckos with the rifle, and you shoot like the bottles, and you go through that little training sequence. That was my introduction to Fallout. That was the very first mission I played when I was just under 10 years old, and ever since then I was a big fan of the franchise. And yeah, so there is a series. So I just wanted to give you that little history to let you know that I'm a big fan of this franchise. While I don't play it anymore, I'm still interested in hearing about news and stuff like this because I love film and television. So we're getting a series, and we're getting it as an Amazon exclusive, which I'm a big fan of Amazon. I think Amazon has been producing a lot of pretty good content lately, especially, there's Rings of Power. I'm not a big Lord of the Rings fan, but I've heard that series is pretty good. They have, I always draw blanks when I'm trying to remember things like this. They have a lot of really good original content on both the film and television side. And I'm not too sure when this is coming, but apparently this has been in development for quite a while now. I'm going to actually read this article, a little snippet from comicbook.com that kind of just talks about the development of this game being translated into a series. So, after years and years of ideas and potential projects in development, Fallout is finally coming to the screen. Amazon Prime Video is adapting Bethesda's iconic video game franchise as a TV show, with Westworld creators Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy leading the charge. The long-awaited series is currently in production, and a new video from Bethesda talking about Fallout's journey to the screen has shown fans a glimpse of the power armor on set. Yeah, that's the video that I watched that then kind of made me realize, like, oh fuck, they're making a Fallout TV show. What a brilliant idea. And I've always thought in the past, like, this could be a cool movie and whatnot, but if you really think about it, I think this actually could be better fleshed out as a TV series because it's such a dense game. It's such a dense story. And there's so many stories and so many adaptations it could pull from because, in each Fallout game, there's always like 4 storylines you could go to because you have the Brotherhood of Steel, you have the NCR, you have, in Fallout 4, you have the Institute, you have the Railroad, there's so many different storylines and ways you can play the game. There's not just like one main quest. You can go down different branches, and that's why it's such a replayable game. And not only that, you have the whole world, you have everything you could explore. So this whole franchise is just like fresh for adaptation on the big screen and on the small screen and television. And I think while a movie could still be good, I think a TV show is going to be pretty good as well. And I think it'll give them an opportunity to, like I said, to explore so many different storylines and give it that time and energy. Similar to what's happening with The Last of Us, right? The Last of Us, you could do that in a film, but they're going to fully explore that story and give it time to breathe, so they're making it into a series. So, and speaking about the potential of it becoming a movie, I want to read another quote from that article, comicbook.com, and this is Todd Howard speaking. Now, For those of you who don't know, Todd Howard is like kind of like the Kevin Feige of Bethesda. He's like the face of, he's like the guy you think of when you think of Bethesda, if you're, tapped in and you pay attention to this kind of stuff. I think specifically his role here is Bethesda studio executive producer. And yeah, so he discusses how long this kind of project has been developing. And he said, a lot of movie producers and stuff were like, hey, this would be a great movie. And for 10 years plus, we said no, just wasn't the right fit. So clearly, I wasn't the only one. And there were others, there were producers that were saying, dude, let's make this into a movie. And he waited. He said, not the time, not the place, not the medium to do this until finally we can make this into a show. And what I find really interesting is that the person, aside from Lisa Joy, I'm not too familiar with her to be honest, but aside from her, we have Jonathan Nolan, who is directing some of the series, and he's basically like the showrunner with Lisa Joy. And Jonathan Nolan is Christopher Nolan's brother. He's written many of Christopher Nolan's films. He helped him write the Dark Knight trilogy, and he's pretty much been his writer on a lot of his other films that he's directed, along with Christopher Nolan writing as well, kind of co-writing their films. So it's pretty cool to see that. And yeah, the video was Jonathan Nolan talking. It almost looked like it was like a shoreside set, or a seaside set rather. There was some debris, some broken stuff around, and you see somebody who's clearly in power armor reach out to Jonathan Nolan. You just see the arm, and he's holding a Nuka-Cola bottle in his hands. So it's a nice little tease. I'm just so curious as to what they're gonna do with Deathclaws. Like I said, there is so much opportunity for this, and this has me incredibly excited. If any of you have played Fallout, you know that the opportunity and the potential for this is the sky's the limit with how good this can be. So yeah, let me see if I address pretty much everything else here. Yeah, so let me know what you guys think. Even if you've never played Fallout, does this sound like something that could be intriguing to you? I'm a huge fan of the post-apocalyptic subgenre, if you will. I just watched The Road for the first time a couple weeks ago. Dark fucking movie, by the way. But even Zombieland to a lesser degree, like stuff like that. I love post-apocalyptic films. They're almost like cathartic in a way. You're usually just following one or few characters on this road, on this journey, and they're just trying to survive, and they're not caught up in what the next person thinks about them on social media. Like I enjoy simple. It's a very simple story, but it's like I love movies and projects like that. So, and I think Fallout is going to be. I think this could be really, really good. And they released a still image recently, and it looks very faithful to the game. We see. I think it's Vault 33. We don't see any characters' faces, but we see that their backs are facing us, and they have the vault uniforms on. It looks very, very faithful to the game, and we see that the vault door is open, and you see a silhouette of someone who's clearly coming from the outside world, exploring some kind of wastelander. You can see he's got a Pip-Boy on, and he's clearly got some kind of armor on, and he's somehow found a way in the vault, whether they voluntarily let him in the vault or he found his own way in the vault. So looks really exciting, and I'm definitely going to keep my eye on this, and as we get more updates and once we get a trailer, I'll talk about it here on the podcast. So let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. So up next, we got some Marvel news. Doesn't ever seem to stop. I'm not complaining. I eat this shit up. I love the MCU. I'm an MCU apologist. I don't care what any of you say. I love this stuff. And when I hear about news, it gets me excited. Even for projects that and characters that I'm not entirely familiar with, like the news we're about to cover here. Just the fact that the MCU continues to grow and expand. We're introducing new characters, new walks of life. That excites me. So the news here is about, and you've probably already heard this, is about Wonder Man, is a character from the comics. And before I talk about the news, I'm going to give you a little bit of a synopsis here, a little bit of a brief summary of who this character is, because I had to do some research myself. And this comes from the Hollywood Reporter. It says, in the 1980s, the character, referring to Wonder Man, In the 1980s, the character really came into his own. Known as Simon Williams, he was a founding member of the Los Angeles-based West Coast Avengers, and with a look that included a turtleneck, red jacket, and sunglasses, became a celebrity thanks to his day job as an actor and stuntman. So, to me, that sounds pretty cool, and I think there's almost an opportunity, there's almost like a meta opportunity here for this as well. Maybe we'll see that he's this very successful actor, and he's acting alongside, main staple actors that we're familiar with in today's society. So, I think there's definitely some comedic opportunity for that, and sort of some, self-awareness to the audience. I think that would be pretty interesting as well. And as a stuntman, so basically, he's a superhero at night, and during the day, he's an actor and a stuntman. So he's pretending to be other people while he's pretending to be a superhero. Could you imagine if he gets a role in this show and he's playing a superhero or some kind of, I'm sure they'll have to make one up, and then he's really a superhero in real life? I think that would be pretty funny and interesting. I'm not too sure what his powers are. But yeah, so the news is that, and I'm going to try and pronounce this as best as I can, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II is tapped to lead Marvel Studios' Wonder Man for Disney Plus. So he will be playing Wonder Man, and I think this is a great casting. I think Yahya Abdul-Mateen II is a fantastic actor. Go watch The Trial of Chicago 7, I think is what the film's called. He had a small role in Us. And then he was the lead actor in Candyman, which I thought was a pretty enjoyable film. I think he was the best part of the film overall. But I think, I think the film was okay, but I think his performance stood out the most. And he's a really, really talented actor. Now, I think it's interesting that he's coming into the MCU. He's playing a superhero because he did an interview a little while back, and I think he was being a little coy. I think he was being a little humorous, and I think people might have taken it a little too serious. But he did say that, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something along the lines of acting in comic book movies is clown work. And he said that in some way, like I said, paraphrasing. But yeah, and a lot of people took offense to that. It's definitely an interesting thing to say. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that I don't think he was being entirely serious. I mean, clearly he wasn't. He signed on to play another comic book character. So now he was a villain in the Aquaman film. I think his character's name, I can't even remember his character's name. And now he's going to be a hero here in the MCU. But apparently this character was once, or apparently he started off as a villain and as an adversary to the Avengers, and apparently he ended up joining them. I could be wrong. Like I said, not too caught up to date with this character. I'm learning this, as some of you might be as well. This is a new character to me. But yeah, so pretty interesting. What do you think about this casting? And this is, like I said, for a Disney Plus series. Are you hoping that Marvel is starting to maybe learn from some of their lessons with the Disney Plus shows in Phase 4? I haven't been the biggest fan of a lot of them, and I feel like partially the issue with these Disney Plus shows is that they're not given enough time to flesh these characters out. And I doubt it's from a budget restraint perspective, because this is Marvel, this is Disney we're talking here. I mean, Disney's one of the most lucrative film studios out there today. And Marvel is, by extension, is no different from that. Marvel has made billions of dollars. So I don't think it's because of that. This sort of 6 to 9 episode format, I feel like it's worked for some shows. Give credit where credit is due. I think Loki, for me, is one of my favorite shows of the last couple of years. I loved Loki. I loved the TVA. So that 6 episode format, it worked for that. I'd say it worked for WandaVision with the 9 episode format. But other than that, it's kind of been hit or miss. With Falcon and Winter Soldier, with Moon Knight, some of these other characters that I think would have benefited from having maybe an extra 1 to 2 episodes, maybe even 2 to 3 episodes. I think would have helped, especially Moon Knight. I feel like that Moon Knight finale just happened, right? We had that 5th episode, which was a great episode, and then that 6th episode. Going into it, I was already kind of worried because I was like, there's still so many questions that they haven't answered, and then it was just boom, like we have these gods, and we have all this other. It just yeah. And then at the very end, they introduced Jake Lockley as that third personality, which we saw coming. But yeah, so I think it's pretty exciting news, and I'm looking forward to hearing more and getting that official word from Kevin Feige. Now, this came from the Hollywood Reporter and all the other trades, so if it comes from them, you could pretty much consider it a done deal. But let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. That's going to wrap up episode 44 of Unbashful. If you stuck around for this long, I want to thank you very, very much. And if you want to show your support, you can like the video, subscribe. I would really, really appreciate it. This is a very up-and-coming channel. And any support, I will appreciate it. Of course, that's if you'd like to share your support. But anyways, I'm not going to be one of those channels that sits here and begs for likes and subscribes. Just you watching, that's enough support for me. So anyways, guys, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you for watching and listening. I wish you all happy, healthy happiness. I just said happy and happiness. I just wish you all good health and everything in between. Have a good night. Have a good evening. Good morning, wherever you are watching this. And I'll see you all on episode 45.